Hey guys, tonight we head back in time to a world where sports weren't just games. They were a sacred spectacle, a sweaty collision of muscle myth and madness. Imagine standing beneath the blinding Greek sun, surrounded by thousands of shouting spectators, the scent of olive oil and body odor thick in the air. You're at Olympia, the holiest site of the ancient Olympic Games. And no, there's no such thing as just watching. You're about to be in it. This isn't your high school track meet. You're oiled up, totally naked, and staring down an opponent who looks like he wrestles lions before breakfast. Your chances slim. But that's ancient Greece. For you, beauty, strength, and bravery mattered more than life expectancy. And trust me, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I always love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge barefoot across the dusty Olympia grounds, squinting as the marble statues of gods seem to judge you silently. Around you, men from all over the Greek world, Athens, Sparta, Thebes, stretch, flex, and glare. The games are held every 4 years, and war is literally paused so athletes can compete. That's right, warring city-states agree to chill just long enough to throw javelins at each other in a slightly more civilized way. The smell of sweat, crushed herbs, and roasted goat meat hangs heavy in the air. Trumpets sound, priests chant. A procession of sacrifices to Zeus has already stained the altar red. You're technically supposed to be a free Greek man to compete, but if you're a Roman noble with enough cash or a friend in high places, you might squeeze in too. Ancient inclusivity had flexible limits. The crowd goes wild as the stadium race begins just one length of the track, about 200 meters. You brace yourself for your turn, knees trembling like olives in a storm. A judge smacks a stick, and they're off, dozens of naked, glistening bodies surging forward, thighs pumping feet, kicking up hot sand. The winner. He gets a wreath of wild olive branches and immortal bragging rights. No gold medals here, just honor. And maybe a statue if you're really something. But don't get too dreamy-eyed. The training behind these six-packed heroes is intense, brutal even. No shoes, no helmets, and a strong chance you'll pass out from dehydration before the final event. The athletes live on diets of figs, barley, and a revolting concoction of raw meat and wine. No protein shakes, no electrolytes, just grit and goat cheese. What's more bizarre, everyone's completely naked. Ancient Greeks believed the human body in its natural form was closest to divine perfection. Which sounds poetic until you're slipping in someone else's sweat mid-race and praying the next event doesn't involve body contact. And oh, it will. A fringe detail: before 720 BCE athletes wore loincloths, but after one too many wardrobe malfunctions, they just ditched the cloth entirely. Some historians still argue whether this was out of practicality aesthetics or just plain bravado. You're ushered into the next event while temple bells clang ominously. You're already sunburned, maybe mildly concussed, and it's only day one. But congratulations. You've officially entered the ancient Olympics. Whether you walk out with a laurel crown or a sprained ankle is entirely up to the gods. You shuffle toward the wrestling pit, your legs still trembling from the stadium race, and if you're lucky, that's just adrenaline, not your knees starting to give out. In ancient Greece, there's no rest between events, unless you count a quick douse in cold water and a motivational slap on the back from an old trainer who smells like olives and regret. Now it's time for Pale Greek wrestling, less WWE, more grind your opponent into the dust, while every bone in your body protests. You step into the pit, the ground dry and gritty beneath your toes. There are no weight classes here. You might face a guy twice your size who eats boiled boar for breakfast and trains by flipping livestock. And there's no timer either. The match ends when someone hits the ground 3 times, or when someone taps out, or more commonly when someone pretends they just dislocated a shoulder to avoid humiliation. The rules: no biting, no eye gouging. Everything else pretty much fair game. You crouch arms out, trying to look fierce. Across from you, your opponent grins all cracked teeth and sand-crusted knuckles. The two of you circle each other like wary stray dogs, and then bam. He lunges, grabs you around the waist, and you're in it. Sand in your eyes, elbow in your ribs. Your face is buried in someone's sweaty armpit, and honestly, you've had better days. Pal isn't just a sport. It's a test of arete or excellence. To the Greeks, wrestling was noble manly and spiritually uplifting, even if it left your spine slightly misaligned. Here's the twist: if you manage to win, you don't just walk away with praise. You earn the right to train in more exclusive events like pancration, which is basically the no-holds-barred cage match of antiquity. But we'll get to that trauma later. And if you lose, you just hope someone has a spare fig or a sympathy hug. The crowd doesn't boo. They don't cheer wildly either. It's more of a silent appraisal, like a jury waiting to decide if you're worth remembering. A failed wrestler doesn't just lose a match, he loses phaisonner kleos, that sweet shimmering Greek idea of eternal glory. You limp off the sand, shoulders aching, jaw rattling slightly in its socket. Your body's a living sculpture of bruises and bad decisions. In the corner, a young boy fans a famous champion with a palm frond. He's got fewer teeth than fingers, and once defeated 5 men in a single match. He catches your eye and smirks. The whisper among competitors is that before each Olympic cycle, athletes undergo a strict 10-month training period in Elis, supervised by judges called Hellenodikai. These aren't just paper pushers, they're former champions themselves, and they'll disqualify you on a whim if they catch you cheating, flinching, or even flubbing a prayer to the wrong deity. Historians still argue whether the training at Elis was truly standardized or if rich athletes got better treatment. You probably won't be shocked to hear that ancient class privilege existed in spades sometimes, with literal spades digging out better track conditions for their favorites. To dull the aches, your trainer rubs a gritty mix of sand and olive oil into your limbs. No icy baths, no muscle cream, just friction and faith. You try not to whimper. Nearby, a crowd gathers for the long jump. Sounds relaxing, right? Just a hop, skip, and a jump into soft sand. Wrong, this is ancient Greece, remember. You wipe the sweat from your brow, still slick with olive oil, and ego bruises, only to be handed a pair of stone weights called halteres. Welcome to the long jump ancient Greek edition. Not your schoolyard leap across a painted line, oh no. This is a theatrical, musical, and vaguely dangerous event where you're expected to defy gravity while carrying what looks like 2 oversized door handles. The halteres weigh between 4 to 12 pounds each. You swing them back and forth in rhythm with the alos player, a double-piped instrument that sounds like a bagpipe trapped inside a goose. Supposedly, the music helps with timing. In reality, it mostly adds stress. You hunch, inhale, swing your arms like a deranged bird trying to take flight and jump. You immediately regret everything. The weights are supposed to help you gain momentum, then be thrown backward mid-air to maximize distance. But unless you're part goat, that's easier said than done. You land with a grunt and an awkward splash of sand. Someone measures with a rope, someone else shakes their head. Your attempt less Olympic record, more mildly disappointing. Still, you're luckier than most. No one laughed, yet. The crowd murmurs in that very Greek way of appreciating effort, while also mentally drafting comedic poetry about your flailing form. In fact, amateur poets often attended these games to compose epigrams, short biting verses about athletes' triumphs and failures. You just might become immortal, but not for the reasons you'd hoped. Here's something the frescoes don't tell you. Nobody knows exactly how the halteres worked. Historians still argue whether athletes actually gained more distance, or if the weights were mostly symbolic. Some even suggest they were just for show props to elevate the aesthetic of the leap. So if you flopped spectacularly, maybe blame your equipment, or the music, or Zeus. As you brush sand from your knees, you spy athletes preparing for the next event, discus throw. That sounds deceptively simple, like an early version of Frisbee, but with heavier consequences. You're handed a solid bronze disc about the size of a dinner plate, and 3 times the weight. The trick is in the spin, a controlled whirl of the arm and hips that sends the discus sailing across the field like an angry dinner guest hurling a plate at bad lamb stew. You rotate, pivot, and throw and pray it doesn't wobble and smack you in the shin. It does. The crowd pretends not to notice. That's polite ancient Greek judgment for you. If it helps, the Greeks saw these events not just as physical tests, but expressions of beauty and harmony. The Thekalokagathiya ideal. A fusion of physical perfection, kalos, and moral goodness, ageirthos, wasn't just about abs. It was about moving like you belonged in a Homeric epic, even while bruised. As you regroup, your competitor pulls off a perfect discus arc that glints in the sun like divine approval. The crowd applauds lightly. Emotional outbursts are for the theater. And speaking of performance, rumor has it that certain athletes would coat their discus in pig fat for better glide. It's a fringe detail not mentioned in polite society, but hey, Greeks were practical. A priest wanders past, muttering a prayer to Nike goddess of victory. He eyes you, maybe sympathetically, maybe judgmentally. Hard to tell when you're covered in a mix of sand shame and swan-shaped bruises. Time for a sip of watered wine, because hydration is important even when you're competing half naked in 100-degree heat. Before you can catch your breath, a horn sounds. It's time for the javelin throw. A pointy stick, a running start, and a wind that never quite works in your favor. Good luck not impaling someone. The javelin looks innocent enough at first, a long, slender spear carved from cornel wood, tipped with nothing more than a sharp point and your expectations. It feels light in your hand, but deceptive, like a polite enemy. This is the archon, the ancient Greek answer to, what if we weaponized precision and shoulder pain? Unlike modern javelins, the Greek version comes with a clever twist, a leather thong called an ankle. It loops around the shaft, and your fingers giving the throw extra spin and supposedly extra range. In theory, it's genius. In practice, it's like trying to launch a spear with a spaghetti strap. You jog to the throwing line, dig your heel into the dust, and try to ignore the fact that your last discus throw almost shattered your own ankle. This time the stakes feel higher. Not because of danger, though impaling is always a possibility, but because the javelin was once a matter of life and death. Hunting, war, even sport, it was all connected. Your trainer yells something about relaxing your elbow, which is about as helpful as telling someone to smile during a stampede. You breathe, run, release, and the javelin slips sideways, wobbling like a drunk mosquito, before landing with a limp plop. A small boy retrieves it, looking unimpressed. The best throwers send the javelin soaring well over 100 feet. Legend has it that a champion named Phaios once threw his javelin farther than anyone had ever measured, though historians still argue whether he existed or was the ancient version of a tall tale with abs. The crowd stays silent, but you hear a faint chuckle. Or maybe that's the wind. Or the gods. Because yes, the gods are always watching. Every event is sacred. Every throw, a sort of prayer. Even the sandpit has been sprinkled with crushed laurel and frankincense, lest someone forget this is Olympia, not recess. But what's truly strange, the javelin event had 2 versions, one for distance and another for accuracy. In the latter, athletes aimed at a fixed target, possibly a shield mounted on a pole. Today, there's no consensus on what that target looked like. Some even think it moved. Let that sink in. You might have just barely missed a stationary sand dune, and now they want you to hit a flying shield like some Bronze Age Hawkeye. After a second better throw, let's not talk about the third one. You stagger back, your shoulder tingling in a way that suggests lifelong regret. Nearby, someone's nursing a swollen wrist with sheep's wool and vinegar. Another athlete practices footwork by mimicking a centaur. It's unclear whether he's eccentric or just very committed to form. In the distance, the dust rises from the hoplitodromos, the race in full armor. But that's for later. First, it's time for the pentathlon's final act, pancration. You've heard stories. No armor, no weapons. Just fists, feet, and one rule: don't gouge out the eyes. Everything else, welcome to ancient MMA. You rub your aching javelin arm, look toward the fighting pit, and try to remember if you updated your will. The pancration is not a place for gentle souls or tender joints. It begins with dust grunts and the kind of casual violence that would make a modern UFC ref lose consciousness. You step into the fighting area, an open patch of earth, no ropes, no rounds, no mercy. Just you, your opponent, and a crowd that's already placing bets on whether you'll cry or pass out first. You eye your opponent. He's wider than a doorway and already bouncing on his toes. Great, he probably eats rocks for breakfast. Pankration, meaning all powers, is a blend of boxing and wrestling, the ancient Greeks' most brutal sport. Striking and grappling are both allowed. Joint locks, chokeholds, kicks to the gut, fists to the throat, all legal. The only true taboos, biting and eye gouging. And even those sometimes accidentally happen when the judges blink. You're barefoot, wearing nothing but a thin belt. Your skin's already slick with sweat, and olive oil, which helps reduce abrasions, also helps your opponent grab you like a greased pig. The match starts. You move left. He moves right. Then suddenly you're airborne. His shoulder crashes into your midsection, and you both hit the ground hard enough to surprise some worms. There's no time to breathe. He's trying to pin you. Maybe snap an elbow for flair. You twist roll flail with as much dignity as possible, which is to say, none. A knee finds your ribs. A palm smacks your ear so hard the world fuzzes. You blindly grab at anything his leg, the ground, the meaning of life. Finally, your fingers lock around his ankle and twist. A surprised grunt, then leverage shifts, and now you're on top. Briefly, pankration wasn't just sport. It was military training. Greek soldiers needed to know how to take someone down when swords weren't an option. Spartan boys learned it before they learned the alphabet. Alexander the Great's men trained in it during campaigns. It was part of your identity, not just your workout plan. And yet historians still argue whether pankration was purely competitive or occasionally used for religious ritual. There are inscriptions suggesting that some victories were offerings to the gods, and stories of fighters who, even after death, were declared winners because their opponent tapped out too late. Think about that: you win a fight after your soul checks out. You dodge a headbutt, just barely. Fun fringe fact: ancient coaches were known to scream strategy mid-match using coded animal names. Crow meant to strike, lion meant to grapple, boar meant, well, do everything like you've lost your mind. You hear someone yell eagle from the sidelines. You have no idea what it means. You decide to take it as moral support. Eventually the match ends, not with a triumphant knockout, but with your opponent mercifully slipping on your oiled thigh and falling hard. He groans. You stagger upright. The crowd cheers half-heartedly, more interested in the upcoming chariot parade. You survived. Barely. Someone hands you a scrap of cloth soaked in wine for your bruises. You sip it instead. There's a deep satisfaction in not dying during pankration. A few broken ribs, maybe a dislocated shoulder, but nothing that won't scar beautifully. And with that, you limp off toward the stables. Your reward isn't rest. It's the next sport. Because no tour of ancient athletics is complete without witnessing the absolute chaos of horse racing. You'd ride yourself, but given that your vision is blurry and your ears ringing like a temple bell, perhaps it's best you just observe this one. You arrive just in time to hear the trumpet blare and the thunder of hooves stampeding across the dusty track. Welcome to the Hippodrome, the ancient Greek arena, where chariot racing unfolds in all its high-speed, spine-snapping, wheel-shattering glory. If pankration was brutality in close quarters, this is violence at 30 miles per hour with horsepower. You take a seat in the stone bleachers among a sea of tunics, goatskin snacks, and sweat. The crowd is already screaming like banshees possessed by the gods of speed. This isn't some polite little race around a neat circle. This is war on wheels. Down below, 4 teams are tearing up the track, each chariot pulled by 2 or 4 horses, depending on the race. The drivers are wiry, sunburnt, and usually slaves or hired pros. The elite wealthy men who own these teams don't risk their necks. They prefer sipping wine in the stands, while shouting things like, "Whip harder," and "Not that turn, you idiot." The drivers wrap the reins around their waists for control, which sounds clever until a chariot flips and the horses keep going. If that happens, you either manage to slice yourself free with a dagger, or you become a human tumbleweed dragged halfway to Thebes. And now, as if summoned by narrative convenience, it happens. One chariot loses a wheel mid-turn, splinters fly the axle buckles, and the driver becomes an instant Greek meme. The crowd erupts in a mix of horror and delight. A few fans pass wine around like popcorn. You try not to wince as the poor guy finally skids to a stop in a cloud of bloodied sand. He'll live. Probably. Chariot racing wasn't just entertainment. It was political. Victories brought honor not to the drivers, but to the wealthy patrons who sponsored the teams. In Athens, a big win might mean influence connections, maybe even a cushy government gig. In Sparta, they didn't even watch Too Frivolous. But in Corinth and Delphi, this was the Super Bowl with less clothing. Historians still argue whether Greek chariot races evolved independently or borrowed heavily from older cultures, especially the Mesopotamians and Egyptians. The format oval tracks turning posts teams looks suspiciously familiar, but the Greeks made it their own with more chaos and fewer safety rails. And here's your quirky fact of the day: some horses were given honorary citizenship. Seriously. In one case, a mare named Aura was listed in public records after carrying her team to victory. Imagine showing up at a town meeting and the horse gets voting rights before you. A particularly tight corner sends up a dust spiral. You squint through the haze as two chariots jostle for the lead wheels, brushing drivers shouting obscenities that even Zeus would blush at. This is the final lap, and the crowd is on its feet, roaring, flailing, placing last-minute bets with crusty coins and questionable IOUs. You can't help but feel the tension. Your heart thuds. Your fists clench. Then suddenly, victory. One chariot pulls ahead just in time to cross the finish line by a nose, or rather by a snorting, foam-drenched muzzle. The winning horses are celebrated with wreaths and feasts. The driver, maybe a pat on the back. The patron, he'll be parading through the agora tomorrow like he personally tamed Pegasus. And you, you're parched, sunburned, and deeply aware that you're one strong breeze away from a nosebleed. But still somehow this wild, dusty chaos is starting to feel thrilling. Of course, the day isn't over. You've still got one last stop in your ancient athletic tour, the sacred gymnasia, a place where the body and mind were both supposed to be honed. But knowing ancient Greece, you're expecting a lot more grunting than Socratic dialogue. Time to gather your sandals and your courage, because it's back to the arena this time for training that's somehow even more revealing. You shuffle toward the gymnasium, hoping for a quiet moment to catch your breath. No such luck. This isn't some chill YMCA. This is a full-blown cultural institution, a sacred space where nudity discipline and philosophy come together in one very slippery marble package. Welcome to the Greek gymnasium, where everyone's oiled up showing off, and somehow still discussing Plato. You step inside, greeted immediately by the glint of sun on bronze statues, the scent of olive oil, and the unmistakable sound of bare feet slapping against stone floors. It's part training center, part school, part social club, and entirely confusing for someone who values personal space. Let's get the awkward bit out of the way. Yes, everyone's naked. Gymnos literally means nude, and the Greeks were very literal people. Athletes believed clothes got in the way of performance, and also why not tan your entire body while you're at it. Your first stop is the Palaestra, a square courtyard for wrestling, boxing, and general flexing. Two young men are circling each other like cats about to scrap over a sunbeam. No referees, no padding, just sweat sand, and sheer determination not to end up face down in public. Then there's the oiling. Oh yes, oil is slathered onto every inch of muscle before exercise. Why to highlight definition? Reduce friction. Summon the gods of sheen. Historians still argue whether the oil was more practical or symbolic. Either way, it's everywhere, and before long it's on you too. Next comes the strigil. This curved bronze scraper is how athletes clean off sweat oil and dust after a session. No showers, just scrape and wipe. Fun fact, people collected the gunk called gloios and sold it as a miracle remedy. That's right, used athlete juice. Rub it on your joints, your scalp, your dreams. In one corner, a trainer, usually a grumpy veteran who smells like garlic and victory, is barking orders at boys learning how to throw the discus. It's not as easy as it looks. You try once, and the discus lands 3 feet away with a sad thunk. Somewhere Zeus sighs in disappointment. But the gymnasium isn't just about brute strength. Philosophy lectures take place right in the colonnades, often mid-workout. Imagine doing squats while arguing about the nature of justice. That's peak Greek. And this isn't just for athletes. If you're a young male citizen, your day starts here. Lessons in music, grammar, math, followed by a casual wrestling match and some Plato. It's a full education soaked in olive oil and ambition. Women, though, not invited. The gymnasion is a strictly male preserve. In Sparta, women train, but in Athens, they're barred from the scene entirely. It's sweaty, philosophical, and very exclusive. One fringe detail most people forget, gymnasia often had altars to Hermes and Heracles, patron gods of athletes. Before competing, you might leave an offering. A bit of bread, a goat, or a quick prayer that your opponent doesn't snap your spine like kindling. And if you're really good, like Olympian good, your body might end up immortalized in sculpture. Bronze or marble, idealized abs and all. Not bad for someone whose job is basically sweaty lunges. As you wind through the colonnades, dodging discus throws and philosophy puns, you notice something strange, the silence of focus. No one's joking, no one's showing off, okay, maybe a little. Everyone here treats the gymnasium like a temple. Fitness, intellect, and community fused into a way of life. You're exhausted. Your arms ache. Your sandals are slippery with borrowed oil. And yet, you get it. The Greeks didn't just play sports for fun. They believed training the body made you a better citizen, a sharper mind in a stronger shell. Still, you've had enough naked elbowing for one day. And while the wrestling match beside you is reaching an intense crescendo, you quietly edge toward the exit. There's just one more stop left on this odyssey, the grandest spectacle of all, the Olympic Games. Time to take your tired limbs and find out why the Greeks believed victory was a taste of the divine. You arrive at Olympia, and even the air feels charged, as if the gods themselves are holding their breath. The scent of pine and trampled earth wafts on a breeze thick with anticipation. Every 4 years, the most elite male athletes from across the Greek world gather here not just to compete, but to be remembered. You step through the sacred grove of Altis, past the grand temples of Hera and Zeus, and straight into the roar of thousands. No tickets, no screens, just dirt heat and a level of cheering that would humble a modern soccer stadium. You clutch your tunic, which you'll soon lose, because yes, these games are nude too. And if you're not from Greece, sorry, foreigners and women can watch but never participate. Rules are rules. The first thing that hits you is the scale. This isn't just a sports event, it's a religious pilgrimage. Before the games even start, there's a solemn truce all wars must pause. Think about that. Rival city-states, Athens, Sparta, Thebes dropping weapons so their best runners can race like gazelles in the dust. We can barely get through a group chat without arguing, but these folks coordinated peace through push-ups. Opening ceremonies begin with sacrifices. 100 oxen are slaughtered in Zeus's honor. Priests chant incense burns and competitors swear an oath to compete fairly. Although let's be real, some athletes definitely sneak in training during the mandatory rest period. Historians still argue whether such early cheating was punished or quietly admired. You step onto the stadion, the original sprint track, a straight 192-meter stretch of packed earth. No shoes, no lanes. No medals, just glory. The crowd hushes. The judge raises a hand. You run. By the halfway mark, your lungs are lava and someone's elbow nearly knocks out a tooth. You come dead last, but no one cares. The real stars are already lining up for pancration, a brutal, no-holds-barred mix of wrestling and boxing. The rules: don't bite and don't gouge eyes. Everything else, fair game. A pancration champion casually dislocates an opponent's shoulder, then lifts him like a rag doll. The crowd goes wild. These guys train from childhood sleep on straw mats and eat nothing but barley and dreams. One quirky historical tidbit: some athletes drank bull's blood for stamina. Unsurprisingly, it often led to, let's say, a different kind of performance. Beyond the dirt and bruises, there's the prestige. Win an Olympic event, and you don't just get a wreath of olive leaves, you return home a legend. Free meals for life, statues in your honor, poets composing odes about your thighs. Athletes became symbols of divine favor, walking proof that the gods smiled on their city. But if you lose, no shame. You competed at Olympia, where even showing up is a kind of immortality. Except if you cheated. Then you'd get a statue, too, of shame. Yes, real stone statues of cheaters were lined up near the entrance, with their names carved in forever. Don't be like this guy, they silently whisper. By dusk, you collapse in the cool shade of the Temple of Zeus. Statues tower above you, including the legendary gold and ivory sculpture of Zeus himself, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And somewhere behind you, a chariot race kicks up dust clouds under a fiery sunset. Drivers whip their horses in perfect unison, wheels barely holding on at every turn. Crashes are expected. Spectators cheer harder when they happen. The games last 5 days. But your body barely lasts 5 hours. You're sunburned, limping, and entirely in awe. And when the final day ends, victors crowned sacrifices made songs, sung something subtle, settles in the air. The knowledge that you were part of something eternal. Even now, people talk about the Olympic spirit. But here you've felt it firsthand, drenched in sweat, blinded by sun, and carried by the roar of thousands. Ancient sports weren't just games. They were a test of body, soul, and honor. No contracts, no endorsements, just humans trying to touch greatness. And now, at long last, you lie on the grass beneath an olive tree. The stars blink open above the Peloponnesian sky. Somewhere nearby, a flute plays soft and tired. It's over. Time to close your eyes. The crowd fades. The dust settles. Your heartbeat, once thunderous with adrenaline, now slows, like a wave easing back into the sea. Every muscle in your borrowed ancient body relaxes one sinew at a time. You lie beneath that moonlit olive tree, cradled by the hum of crickets and the warmth of fading torchlight. The cheers of Olympia melt into a distant memory, like echoes in a dream. Whatever bruises you've earned tonight, you've also earned rest. Let the marble statues stand tall. Let the gods keep watch. You brave time traveler have seen what few ever do, and survived to drift gently into slumber. No races left to run, no discus left to throw, just the soft hush of history tucking you in. Sweet dreams. Hey guys, tonight we journey through the dizzying heights of the Andes, where the air is thin, the gods are many, and the empires are made of stone and bureaucracy. Welcome to the Inca Empire. It's majestic, it's massive, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive the first 24 hours. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your day at 11,000 feet above sea level. Literally. That's the altitude of Cusco, the Inca capital, nestled in the heart of the Andes. The view is breathtaking, so is the air. Within 5 minutes, your temples throb, your lungs wheeze. and your knees start asking questions. Your body wasn't built for this kind of oxygen poverty. You try to take deep breaths, but they come out shallow and rapid, like a poorly rehearsed panic attack. Welcome to hypoxia. Incas, however, had no such problem. They were born here, raised here, and somehow thrived with lungs like bellows. Modern researchers believe their hemoglobin adapted to absorb oxygen more efficiently. There's even evidence that their chest cavities were larger on average, more air per gasp. Lucky them. You, on the other hand, are one altitude-sick headache away from kissing the stone steps. You wander into town, hoping to find a bench, or ideally a pharmacy. No dice. Instead, you find walls. Not just any walls, perfectly cut stones stacked together so tightly you can't slip a blade of grass between them. No mortar, just architectural sorcery. And those walls still standing after earthquakes that flattened Spanish cathedrals. The Incas knew something we didn't. The streets are crawling with color-coded tunics. People wear their social status literally. Tunics called uncus show whether someone's a noble, a commoner, or a low-level administrator doomed to track potatoes all day. You wearing your breathable hoodie and tourist socks draw the kind of stares reserved for escaped demons. A barefoot child drops her maize cake. Someone mutters the Quechua equivalent of what is that. You try to greet a man selling coca leaves. He eyes your pale face and assumes rightly you're not from around here. He hands you a handful of the bitter green leaves and pantomimes chewing. You obey. It tastes like sadness and leaf mold, but after a few minutes your headache lifts. Coca leaves nature's original energy drink. Historians still argue whether the Incas understood the full physiological benefits of coca, or if they just liked feeling slightly less dead while climbing mountains. Either way, they used it in rituals, labor, and medicine. And now so do you. You make it halfway up the next flight of stone stairs before collapsing like a poorly packed alpaca sack. Several locals step over you with practiced indifference. To them, you're just another soft-lunged outsider who couldn't hack the altitude. One even offers a sympathetic glance before jogging past uphill. And here's a fun fringe tidbit: Inca runners, or chasquis, could cover over 150 miles a day. On foot. Through mountains. Using only a relay system and more lung capacity than your entire high school swim team. A llama walks by, looks you dead in the eye, and spits. You wake up to the sound of pan flutes and shouting. Turns out it's census day again. The Incas were obsessed with counting things. People livestock bags of quinoa, probably how many alpacas sneezed last winter. And if you're in the empire, you're getting counted. No exceptions. Even if you're lightheaded, dehydrated, and have no idea what's happening. A stern official in a dark tunic marches up and stares at you like you're a very uncooperative potato. He's holding a quipu, a series of knotted strings that somehow function like spreadsheets. Each knot loop and color represents data, age, sex, job, maybe even how many teeth you have left. You look at the knots. They look back smugly. Modern scholars still argue whether quipus were a full-blown writing system or just super fancy accounting. Some think there was a narrative code woven in like an ancient frayed Kindle. Others say, no, it's just Incan Excel. Either way, they're terrifyingly efficient. You're ushered into a queue standing between a weaver with impressively calloused hands and a man who smells like dried guinea pig. The official ties a small string around your wrist, your temporary tax tag, and mutters something about your likely labor classification. That's when it hits you. You're now a mita laborer. Congratulations. You've just been drafted into the empire's economy. The mita wasn't technically slavery. You weren't owned, you just owed the state a few months of back-breaking service every year. That might mean farming terraced plots, hauling stones up the side of a mountain, or weaving cloth until your fingers forgot what rest felt like. And if you think you can skip out, good luck with that. The Inca bureaucracy made sure your absence would be noticed and punished. A bell rings. People start moving. You're herded toward a worksite like a confused duckling. A man hands you a crude wooden hoe and points toward a field of maize. The sun's barely risen, but you're already sweating through your synthetic t-shirt. The air might be thin, but the expectations are crushing. There's no money here, by the way. The Inca economy worked on reciprocity and redistribution. You give labor, the state gives food, clothes, maybe a gold necklace if you're extra special. You look longingly at a roasted cuy guinea pig spinning over a communal fire. Too bad your morning wage is 2 boiled potatoes and a ladle of chicha, a fermented corn drink that tastes like regret and warm vinegar. You try to sip the chicha, but it's a weird consistency, and then someone tells you it was probably chewed and spat by the village women before fermenting. You promptly choke, and the man beside you laughs so hard he nearly drops his hoe. Rookie, he snorts in Quechua. Your feet are blistering, your back is shrieking, and the sun isn't even overhead yet. Nearby, a woman twice your age expertly tills a patch of earth while balancing a toddler on her back. She's humming, you're barely functioning. Fringe tidbit, the Incas likely moved tens of thousands of people around the empire each year for mita service. Whole communities were transplanted to maintain harmony, suppress rebellion, and ensure every road bridge and food store was staffed. They called it mitma. You call it logistical nightmare fuel. You try to sneak away during a water break, but 2 children block your path. One offers you another coca leaf. The other hands you a second hoe. This is your life now. Your calloused hands now blister beneath the relentless rhythm of state-ordered labor. As you stagger back to the storage compound at the end of the workday, barely upright, and smelling like a wet llama, you notice the sheer scale of Inca logistics. You may have woken up a confused tourist, but now you're part of a tightly woven imperial machine. Welcome to the supply chain. The Colca state storehouses dot the mountain slope like stone freckles. Inside rows of dried maize, freeze-dried potatoes, chuño textiles, tools, and even weapons are stacked with obsessive care. You're assigned to inventory duty, which sounds great, until you realize inventory involves carrying sacks heavier than your self-esteem. Up narrow trails, while someone yells at you to mind the llama dung. These warehouses are part of the Inca redistribution system. No markets, no merchants. Just government warehouses where goods are stored and sent where needed. Central planning on steroids. Historians still argue whether this was brilliant socialism or terrifying surveillance capitalism with extra quinoa. You're told to walk to the next Tambos way stations along the Capac Ñan, the Great Inca Road. It's a dazzling feat of engineering, over 24,000 miles of stone roads across cliffs, jungles, deserts, and snow, all built without the wheel. Yes, without the wheel. Try processing that while your modern sneakers disintegrate on a steep incline that feels like climbing a stairmaster powered by spite. The Inca messengers chasquis race past you, barefoot, carrying knotted quipas and verbal messages, puffing coca leaves, and vaulting between stations like caffeinated gazelles. You pant uphill like a dying accordion, while a 12-year-old chasqui jogs by with a sarcastic smile. One stops beside you, drops a satchel, and motions for you to carry it the next leg. You open it, a bundle of coca leaves, 2 roasted guinea pig legs, and oddly, a carved obsidian blade. You ask what's in it. He shrugs and says something in Quechua that probably translates to "don't drop that unless you want your ancestors to haunt you." Despite your fatigue, you're starting to marvel at the sheer coordination it takes to feed, clothe, and move an empire of 10 million people in the Andes without horses, currency, or writing as we know it. It's mind-blowing even while your lungs scream and your shins beg for mercy. Midway through your trek, you pass a rope bridge dangling over a canyon so deep it feels like the Earth's personal jump scare. It sways ominously. A llama crosses before you absolutely unbothered. You, however, whimper involuntarily. Locals laugh. One yells, "Don't look down, just think of it as a really aggressive hammock." You step forward anyway. Regret is instant. The bridge groans. You may cry a little. That's okay. You survive the crossing barely and collapse beside a cold stream. Someone hands you a drink made of purple corn and spices. It tastes like cinnamon and soil, but it's oddly comforting. A woman nearby spins thread from alpaca wool faster than you can think. You try to help, and end up tangling your fingers into a fluffy noose. She kindly confiscates your effort before it becomes a felony. A local elder leans in and tells you stories of Inti the sun god and Pachamama the earth mother. The two forces, he says, are constantly in balance, and you're part of that. You nod respectfully, though the only thing you feel in balance with is your exhaustion. Quirky detail, many Inca nobles reportedly had their toenails painted and carried gold ear spools the size of bagels. Meanwhile, you haven't bathed in days, and your socks are an ecological hazard. Nobility had it nice, but for everyone else, hope you enjoy walking uphill forever. By the time night falls, your body is wrecked, but you're starting to sense the rhythm of this place. Order, movement, storage, and survival. The Inca Empire isn't just a place, it's a pulsing bureaucratic organism, and you're now a single exhausted cell in its bloodstream. You wake to a hand prodding your ribs, and the words tribute inspection ringing in your ears like an unpaid bill. Apparently, sleeping near a state warehouse makes you part of the local Ailu, or kin-based community unit. Congratulations. You're now expected to contribute your fair share to the empire, or else. This isn't about gold or silver. It's about labor. Mita the Inca Corvée system isn't optional. You get no paycheck, but you do get a generous portion of fatigue and sunburn. Today, your assignment is agricultural terracing planting and harvesting for imperial storage. The terraces sprawl endlessly across the mountainsides like some sort of geometrical hallucination. You're told the Incas invented ways to farm at every altitude. You're also pretty sure they invented new ways to torture your thighs. You fumble with a takla, a foot plow, you're supposed to jab into the earth. It's like trying to dig with a metal goat. A nearby farmer sighs and gently takes it from you. It's not a sword, he says. It's a whisper. You nod solemnly as if you understand. You absolutely do not. And then, splat. You step ankle deep into something. Moist. It's llama dung, again. You are now convinced the Incas strategically deployed llamas just to see what unsuspecting tourists would step in. The farmer laughs. You try to laugh too, but you've swallowed dust and possibly a beetle. Mita isn't always farming, though. The next week, yes. Week you're assigned to construction. You help carve stones for a temple wall, so perfectly fitted, not even a knife blade can slip between the joints. No mortar, just sheer willpower and geometry. Historians still argue how these stones were cut and moved. Some say copper tools and grit. Others whisper about sound waves or lost alien tech. You're too tired to care. You've named your favorite boulder Steve and regularly whisper threats at it. Lunch is choclo con queso, giant corn kernels with salty cheese. You're surprised how comforting it is. You sit in silence with workers whose hands tell stories older than your entire country. A little girl offers you a woven bracelet, says it's for protection. You take it not knowing what from, but something tells you you'll need it. Then comes huaca duty. You're ordered to help clean the perimeter of a sacred site, a rocky outcrop that supposedly houses the spirit of a mountain god. Offerings are left corn beer feathers, coca leaves. The high priest mumbles something while burning resin that smells like forgotten incense and smoked bacon. It's spooky, but beautiful. You feel out of place, but weirdly honored. A whisper reaches your ear. Don't step on the shadow of the shrine. You freeze mid-step. Apparently that's bad luck. Someone once did, they say, and got struck by lightning the same day. Maybe don't test that one. And then there's quipu training, sort of. An old man lets you touch a knotted cord system used for record keeping. Colors knots, spacing all math communication census and tribute records wrapped in string. It looks like a yarn explosion, but it's how they kept this massive empire running. You see chaos, the elder says, I see memory. You ask if it's writing. He pauses. We're still arguing about that, he says, and smirks. As the sun sets over the mountains, casting gold across the terraced hills, you realize something sobering. This world organized sacred tireless leaves no room for the idle. You don't clock in and out. You serve, or you vanish. There's no market here. No money in your pocket. No weekend escape. Everything belongs to the Empire, even your sweat. And as you collapse into another pile of woven blankets still smelling faintly of guinea pig grease and crushed corn, you realize the Inca didn't just build roads and temples, they built a way of life that doesn't stop for anyone, not even you. The morning air slices straight through your borrowed alpaca cloak as you're dragged from sleep with the phrase, "Time to walk." No explanation, just a small sack of dried maize and a gourd of chicha shoved into your hands. You join a caravan on the Capac-An, the famed Inca road system, a marvel of engineering, also a certified nightmare for your arches. These are not your average roads. They're arteries of stone and rope that pulse across deserts, valleys, jungles, and mountaintops. You begin to suspect the Incas had a vendetta against flat land. Some trails cling to cliffsides like spider webs. Others vanish into clouds so thick you start praying to any deity available, including possibly the potato. You are part of a Chasqui relay today. That's right, Inca messengers who run. For miles. At altitude. Carrying verbal reports or precious quipu. No mailboxes here. Just legs and lungs. Yours sadly are burning. You run until your spleen feels like it's threatening mutiny. Eventually you duck into a tambos or rest station, one of many dotting the road every few kilometers. Inside, a young Chasqui hands you a small knotted cord and says, "Next relay's yours." You smile and pretend not to see the judgment in his eyes. You've already tripped 3 times and invented a new curse involving llama ankles. You cross a rope bridge. You are not okay. These bridges suspended by grass cords and sheer optimism sway with every breath. You hold on like you're hugging the last chocolate bar on Earth. Below is a canyon so deep the bottom looks like a rumor. And then you arrive at a checkpoint overseen by an imperial Tokoyrikok, a regional inspector. He looks you over and asks questions through an interpreter. Where's your labor badge? Who assigned your route? You blink. This feels less like a road trip and more like being detained at an airport run by stern dads in feathered hats. The Inca road system didn't just move people. It moved power. Troops' food messages, even sacred objects, all flowed through these veins. You pass groups of porters carrying royal litter platforms. No wheels, no animals, just people. Somewhere out there, the Sapa Inca glides like a god, while your left foot begins muttering threats. You see a procession in the distance, priests, musicians, nobles in feathered headdresses, and soldiers with gleaming obsidian clubs. A ritual in progress. Maybe a sun festival. Maybe a royal decree. Historians still argue whether these traveling performances were mostly political theater or true acts of devotion. Either way, you are handed a pan flute and pushed forward. You wheeze into the instrument like an asthmatic pigeon. Someone applauds out of pity. By now your calves are cramping, your lips are sunburned, and you have serious trust issues with anything labeled footpath. You marvel how this empire without wheels, horses, or writing as you know it, managed to run circles around civilizations with more tech and worse knees. At nightfall, you rest near another tambos, listening to distant flute notes and the rustle of woven gear. A boy tells you this road stretches thousands of kilometers connecting Ecuador to Chile. All part of the same body, he says. The Sapa Inca's blood flows through it, and you believe it. These paths weren't just for travel. They were ideological physical proof that the center held. That everything, even you, orbited the divine. But if you think you're done walking, think again. Tomorrow is llama caravan escort duty. More altitude. Less dignity. And maybe, just maybe, you'll stop smelling like foot sweat and roasted tubers. Doubtful. You're herded out of the tambos before dawn, still sore from yesterday's mountain marathon, only to be greeted by your next assignment. Llama Caravan Detail. Your job, escort a small herd loaded with textiles, coca leaves, and jars of pickled peppers down a path so narrow even your shadow looks nervous. The llamas seem unconcerned. In fact, they seem smug. You, on the other hand, spend the morning being spat at, ignored, or dragged sideways every time a butterfly flutters. Apparently, llamas are less beasts of burden and more sassy co-workers with hooves. The trade route you follow winds toward a valley market. You'd think you'd get to spend your day sampling corn beer and woven bags. But no. The Inca market isn't for bargaining. There's no currency. Instead, goods are exchanged by reciprocal agreement, tracked by local officials. You offer chili peppers, get potatoes. You offer fish, get herbs. Everything flows in a tangled bureaucratic ballet. A trader inspects your goods with a stare that could burn through wool. You get nervous. He says your coca is dry. Your companion translates. Next time, add a pinch of ash. Keeps the flavor bright. You nod seriously, pretending you have any idea what you're doing. The llama beside you sneezes in what feels like judgment. By mid-afternoon, you're asked to join a ritual offering for the apus, the mountain spirits. The priest burns dried flowers and feathers while whispering thanks. You awkwardly hold a bundle of maize and hope it doesn't ignite. It smells like burnt popcorn and mystery. A woman tells you the valleys must be fed, or they get jealous. You believe her, especially after a small tremor shakes the earth beneath your feet. Then it's time for community theater, literally. You're drafted into a Wilak Umaliad performance, dramatizing one of the founding myths of the Inca. You're cast as Pachacuti's confused assistant. Fitting. Your job is to fall off a fake boulder during the climax. You give it your all and land in a suspiciously spiky bush. Everyone claps. A kid hands you a sweet purple corn snack. You die well, he says. Despite the exhaustion, you start noticing things. The rhythm of daily life here isn't just labor, it's cosmic. Every gesture, from planting a potato to braiding a sling, fits into a sacred choreography. You see a woman tie her baby to her back with the same knot used in quipu. You see fields plowed not just for yield, but in honor of Inti, the sun god. Even chewing coca is a prayer. One old man pulls you aside and shows you a gnarled root. This cures fever, he says. Another points to a twisted cactus. That one makes you dream of birds. You wonder how many of these folk remedies modern medicine has barely begun to study. Historians still debate how much of Inca pharmacology was effective treatment, and how much was symbolic ritual. You're just happy the llama spit isn't one of the ingredients. As night falls, you're finally allowed to rest near the market. The stars above you are so clear they look painted. Someone points to a dark patch among the Milky Way. That's the llama constellation, they whisper. It drinks from the river sky. You squint. Sure enough, the stars form the shape of the very creature currently chewing your sleeve. It hits you then. This isn't just a society. It's a whole cosmology. A world where the animals, mountains, stars, and people are all linked in contracts of mutual care, sacrifice, and obligation. The empire doesn't rule by sword alone. It rules by worldview. You're not just part of the system, you're part of the cosmos. And whether you like it or not, the cosmos expects you to pull your weight. You lie back on your makeshift mat, smell the mingled aromas of roasted corn and alpaca fur, and prepare for the next day's journey, silently hoping it involves less spitting and fewer thorns. You wake up sore in places you didn't know existed, your blanket tangled around your ankles, and a llama sniffing your hair. The smell of burnt quinoa and wood smoke lingers in the crisp morning air. Your breakfast is a cold potato dipped in clay, a surprisingly common snack here meant to neutralize toxins and aid digestion. Tastes like earth because it is earth. You chew anyway because there's no other option, and also because someone's watching you. Today you've been chosen to participate in something more intense than a llama parade or ritual theater. You're headed into one of the Mite work rotation state-sponsored labor that every able-bodied citizen is required to do. There's no escaping this civic duty. Building terraces, carving stone, repairing roads. It's how the empire keeps itself going. And it's your turn. The foreman, a wiry man, with a voice like cracked leather, hands you a blunt chisel and gestures to a half-finished wall. You're building an andon, an agricultural terrace, that clings to the mountainside like moss. You begin hammering away your fingers, already blistering. Nearby, a woman carves irrigation channels with swift, practiced movements. She's pregnant. She's also clearly better at this than you. Mid-morning, an overseer inspects your work. He frowns at your crooked stones and casually mentions that stones in Cusco temples were cut so perfectly they needed no mortar. They say the rocks knew where to go, he says, clearly unimpressed with your asymmetrical mess. You smile weakly. Historians still argue whether the precision of Inca masonry was due to superior tools, secret techniques, or an absolutely crushing fear of state punishment. To keep your spirits up, someone starts singing a yaravi, a haunting, slow melody that winds through the air like fog. Others join in. The rhythm helps you find a working pace. You even start to feel like you belong until your rock slips and lands on your foot. A young boy, maybe 9, casually rolls it off with a strength that makes you reevaluate your entire fitness routine. After hours of labor, the foreman calls for a break. You expect rest. Instead, it's time to honor Pachamama, Mother Earth. A small hole is dug, and food scraps are buried as offerings. You're handed a dried guinea pig leg and told to contribute. You hesitate. The woman beside you shrugs. It's not for us. It's for her. You drop the offering in, hoping that Pachamama prefers sincerity over flavor. Then the sky darkens. Not with clouds, those are normal, but with eerie timing. A solar eclipse begins to blot out the sun, and the mood shifts instantly. People kneel. The llamas stop chewing. Children are ushered indoors. One elder throws coca leaves into the air. Another cries out to Inti, the sun god, begging him not to abandon the earth. You feel that same primal fear in your stomach, the kind that doesn't care how many science documentaries you've watched. An old woman grabs your hand. Don't look directly. It's a test. You look anyway. Of course you do. The sky is ink, and the sun is a burning hole. A bird shrieks. You half expect the ground to split open. The light returns slowly. Relief washes over the camp. Someone laughs nervously. Another offers a fermented drink made from chewed maize. You decline, politely, still reeling from what just happened. Historians still debate how much Inca astronomy influenced their religion, and whether events like eclipses were recorded in quipu or passed on orally through coded myths. Either way, you feel changed. You're allowed to stop working early, a gesture of thanks from the foreman, either for surviving the day or not actively ruining the terrace. As you limp back to your shelter, you reflect on what mita really is: not just forced labor, but a social contract. Everyone gives, everyone receives. If you died tomorrow, someone else would finish your wall. If they fell ill, you'd finish theirs. That's how the empire stays strong, through thousands of hands doing tiny, imperfect things together. The sky is pink now, and you lie down exhausted. Someone sings again, a tune you recognize from the morning. You hum along quietly. The song ends. No applause, just silence. You close your eyes and feel for a moment like you've carved a tiny notch into this giant mountain of a civilization. You barely sleep before you're stirred again, this time by the steady beat of drums echoing across the mountains. Today is no ordinary day. It's time for a state ritual. And by ritual, what they mean is a deeply orchestrated cosmic production involving thousands of people, ceremonial processions, perfectly timed offerings, and at least one guy in a golden sun mask. You're herded, yes, herded, toward the main square of the village along with everyone else. Children wear bright feathers. Old women chant prayers, and someone smears a stripe of red pigment down your nose before you can object. You've officially become part of the scenery. Up the mountain from Cusco, a royal messenger has arrived, bearing news the emperor, the Sapa Inca, has ordered an Inti Raymi ceremony in honor of the sun god. It will be reenacted here too. And you've been volunteered as one of the extras. You will play a peasant, bringing offerings to the divine. The ceremony begins with dancing slow. Stomping movements meant to mimic the rising and falling of the sun. You try to follow along, but you have the grace of a concussed alpaca. A priest in brilliant robes sings praises to Inti, waving a ceremonial fan made of parrot feathers. A small boy lights incense, the smoke rising in hypnotic spirals. A hush falls. From behind a screen of woven mats emerges the ceremonial stand-in for the Sapa Inca. He's not the real emperor, of course, but a noble assigned to play the part, cloaked in shimmering gold plates that catch the sunlight and send it slicing through the air. Even from a distance, he radiates authority. You kneel with the others, feeling the weight of expectation. The high priest raises a goblet of chicha, the sacred corn beer, and pours it into a stone basin carved to drain toward the sun temple. A llama white, spotless, and surprisingly calm, is brought forward for the symbolic sacrifice. Don't worry, they're not doing it here. At least not in this village. But the tension is real. You glance around and notice something strange. A row of women watching from the shadows cloaked in dark wool. They are akalas, or chosen women, plucked from their families as young girls to serve the gods. They make sacred beer-weave divine cloth, and sometimes, yes, are offered as literal brides to the sun. Historians still argue whether this was an honor or a gilded cage. Either way, their gaze is piercing. The ceremony ends with a communal cheer, and you're offered a handful of toasted corn and a few coca leaves. You chew slowly, not sure whether to feel blessed or deeply weirded out. Maybe both. The crowd disperses to feast roasted guinea pig maize pancakes and spicy sauces made with jungle peppers. You take small bites and try not to overthink anything. Later, you're guided to a quiet space overlooking the mountains. An elder sits there, humming, weaving threads into a large textile. You're told that this is how history is recorded here, not with books, but with quipus knotted cords and with tokopus woven patterns, whose meanings are still debated by scholars today. The elder gestures for you to sit. You do. No words, just the breeze, the slow movement of fingers through fiber, and the distant call of birds. There's something comforting in the stillness, in the way this world keeps spinning, whether or not you understand it. You realize the Inca didn't build their empire through brute force alone. It was rhythm coordination, belief. You didn't last a day, not really. But you felt a day, and that counts for something. As the stars begin to emerge, shimmering in constellations you've never noticed before, you're reminded that the Inca saw animals, tools, and stories in the sky. The Milky Way. That's the celestial river, the Llama constellation. It's there, drinking from it. You stare up, humbled. Maybe tomorrow you'll return home. Maybe not. Maybe this empire will fall someday, ravaged by invaders, disease, betrayal. But tonight it stands. Tonight you're part of it. The fires have burned low, and the mountains breathe a slow, ancient rhythm. You curl deeper into your blanket, your muscles aching from stonework and dancing, your mind buzzing from sun gods and sacred llamas. The air is thin, but soft. The kind that makes everything feel a little closer. Closer to the stars, to the gods, to history. You trace your fingers through the dirt beside you, remembering the knots, the patterns, the songs you didn't understand, but still felt deep in your chest. Tomorrow will come with more duties, more ceremonies, maybe even a parade. But for now, you drift gently like mist rolling down the Andes. So rest, traveler. The empire is safe. The mountains are watching. And your place in the story, however strange, has been woven in sweet dreams.